My name is Dylan, and this story dates back 14 years to my sophomore year of high school. I was a typical angst-filled teenager who hated school, hated authority, and just wanted the day to end so I could go home and play video games. My high school was aggressively average, about 600 students, a standard brick building, boring teachers. Nothing exciting ever happened there. Every day was a carbon copy of the last, a loop of monotony that I thought would never break. Tensions were weirdly high that year, though. The student body was getting rowdier. Fights were breaking out in the cafeteria weekly, and the teachers were losing their patience. You could feel a strange electricity in the air, like a storm was brewing. I kept to myself mostly. I had learned from dealing with bullies in middle school that the best survival strategy was to be invisible. I sat near the wall in my classes, observing everything but rarely participating. Just a ghost in the back of the room. It was a Tuesday second period. I was staring at the analog clock on the wall, watching the second hand tick, completely bored. The classroom was filled with the usual low hum of whispers, tapping pencils, and daydreaming. It was the definition of a normal day. Then, the PA system chimed. We all looked up, expecting a standard announcement about club meetings or a lost backpack. Instead, the principal's voice came through. It was strained, serious, and stripped of his usual friendly tone. Code black. Lock all doors immediately. Code black. This is not a drill. The speaker cut out with a static pop. I looked at the emergency color-coded chart pinned to the bulletin board. My stomach dropped into my shoes when I read the description. Code black. Verified threat on campus. Imminent danger. This was unprecedented. We did fire drills, sure. We even did tornado drills. But we had never, ever practiced for a lockdown. This was something you saw on the news happening to other schools. Not something that happened in our quiet, boring town. The atmosphere in the room transformed instantly. My teacher, Mr. Innes, sprinted to the door. He locked it, threw the deadbolt, and frantically taped a piece of construction paper over the small window to block the view from the hall. He killed the lights. The room, which had been bright and noisy seconds ago, plunged into pitch darkness and absolute heavy silence. Mr. Innes moved to the corner and motioned for us to get on the floor and stay down. At first, my adrenaline kept me focused. I told myself it was probably a mistake, or maybe a prank. But as the silence stretched on, the psychological weight of the situation began to crush me. The darkness felt like it had weight. It was so quiet. You could hear the shallow breathing of the person across the room. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, pregnant with the threat of violence. I scanned the room, my eyes adjusting to the gloom. I looked at the faint outlines of my classmates, the class clowns, the guys who usually couldn't shut up for 5 seconds, were frozen like statues, eyes wide and terrified. That was the scariest part for me. Watching the personalities of everyone I knew get erased by fear. We weren't students anymore. We were just prey, hiding in the dark, waiting for a predator we couldn't see. Every creak of the building settling sounded like a footstep approaching the door. Every distant noise from outside sounded like a gunshot. My mind played cruel tricks on me, imagining the doorknob slowly turning or a shadow pausing under the door frame. We sat there for what felt like hours, though looking back, it was probably only 45 minutes. My legs fell asleep and my back ached against the hard wall, but I was too terrified to shift my weight or make a sound. Finally, the all clear announcement came over the speakers. The lights flickered back on, blinding us momentarily. The relief was instantaneous, but it was followed by a strange, hollow feeling. We survived, but the innocence of the school was gone. At lunch, the truth finally came out. A student from our grade had brought a large hunting knife to school and had barricaded himself in the principal's office, threatening to hurt people. He was disarmed by police and expelled immediately. It wasn't a mass attack, and nobody was physically hurt, but the reality of it shook me to my core. For nearly an hour, we sat in the dark, genuinely believing we might die. It taught me a harsh lesson, that an ordinary, boring Tuesday can turn into a nightmare in the blink of an eye. This nightmare happened when I was 16, attending a small, underfunded suburban high school. We were used to the routine of fire drills, usually treating them like free breaks to stand outside and talk to friends. But one Thursday afternoon, the tone shifted drastically. The intercom announced a lockdown, but there was no code phrase, no warning, just the principal's voice, stripped of all professionalism, sounding truly scared. Teachers, secure your rooms. Now, my history teacher killed the lights and locked the door instantly. But whispers started spreading immediately. Rumors of a weapon, of someone already inside the building. Panic took over. And we didn't just stay in the corner. We heard heavy running footsteps echoing down the tiled hallway outside. Our teacher, eyes wide with fear, whispered that we needed to move deeper into the building, away from the glass windows of the classroom that made us sitting ducks. In the confusion and the rush to move, a group of 6 of us got separated from the main class. Terrified and looking for any cover, we slipped through a maintenance door and ended up hiding in the basement, specifically in the old boiler room. The atmosphere down there was oppressive. It smelled of ancient dust, rusting metal, and stale air. The massive pipes running along the ceiling ticked and hissed constantly, a mechanical heartbeat that made it impossible to hear if anyone was coming down the stairs. We shut the heavy iron door behind us and sat in the semi-darkness. At first, the lack of windows felt safe, a fortress. But as minutes turned into hours with no cell service and no updates from above, the silence became heavy and suffocating. Then about an hour in, we realized we weren't alone. From the dark shadows in the far corner, where the pipes fed into the concrete walls, we heard a distinct sound. It was the scrape of metal dragging against concrete. Scrape, scrape. We shined a shaky phone flashlight into the corner. The beam cut through the dust and landed on a figure. It was Mr. Price, the school janitor. Usually he was a quiet, invisible guy who just pushed a mop, but he looked completely different now. His uniform was filthy, covered in layers of old grease and grime. His hair was matted and his eyes were wide, bloodshot, and manic. He looked like a feral animal that had been cornered. He didn't look like a school employee anymore. When we stammered asking him what he was doing, he didn't answer normally. He just stared at us, unblinking, and muttered in a low, raspy voice, "You shouldn't be here. You can't be here. This is my place. This is my home." We looked around and realized with horror that he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He had been living down there. There was a dirty cot, piles of empty canned food, stacks of stolen student clothes, and a weird collection of lost and found items. He had carved out a secret, twisted life beneath the school. His mood shifted rapidly from confused to aggressive. He began pacing the small room, gripping a heavy, rusted pipe wrench in his hand. He started accusing us of being spies, sent by the principal to expose him and kick him out. "You're going to tell them, aren't you?" he whispered, a dangerous edge in his voice. He slammed the boiler room door shut and locked it from the inside with a massive ring of keys from his belt. We were trapped in there with him underground, with no way to call for help. The fear was paralyzing. He would vanish into the shadows between the boilers and then reappear inches from our faces, swinging the wrench playfully, smiling a toothy, broken smile. He was enjoying the power he had over us. We huddled together, terrified to move, trying to come up with a plan. One of the guys tried to shove the door when the janitor wasn't looking, but the deadbolt held fast. Mr. Price heard the noise and laughed. A low, guttural sound that made my skin crawl to scare us further. He swung his wrench and smashed a valve on one of the pipes. Hot steam hissed out violently, filling the room with suffocating heat and blinding white fog. He stood in the mist, grinning like a demon, watching us cough and panic. Finally, through the steam, one of us spotted a small maintenance hatch behind a stack of cardboard boxes. It was tiny, barely big enough for a person, but it was our only chance. While Mr. Price was muttering to himself in the corner, we quietly slid the boxes aside. One by one, we squeezed through the hatch into a dirty crawl space. I was the last one through. I expected to feel the heavy wrench smash into my legs at any moment, but I pulled myself into the darkness just in time. We crawled over rats and debris until we found a storage hallway and ran for our lives. We burst out of the basement and found police officers upstairs. It turned out the actual intruder outside the school had been caught hours ago. The only real danger we were in was from the man living beneath our feet. Mr. Price was arrested, but I'll never forget the sound of that wrench clanging against the pipes in the dark. It was the middle of my junior year in high school, a time when I thought I had seen it all. I had been through countless lockdown drills before. We all knew the routine. Turn off the lights, sit in the corner, and whisper dumb jokes to your friends until the teacher told you to get up. It was usually just a boring break from class. But this specific event was different. It stands out in my memory as the single most terrifying experience of my teenage years, even though the ending turned out to be completely absurd. To this day, my brain still refuses to let go of the visceral fear I felt, the what-if scenarios playing on a loop. I was sitting in third period history class, mindlessly sketching abstract shapes in the margins of my notebook. My teacher, An older man with a monotone voice was droning on about the political nuances of World War II. It was a bright sunny afternoon, and the blinds were only half drawn, letting calm streaks of dust dance in the light. Suddenly, the intercom system screeched to life with a piercing feedback noise that made everyone wince. It was Mrs. Jenkins, the receptionist. Usually her voice was robotic and calm during drills, but this time she sounded breathless, her voice trembling and cracking as she spoke. Attention, all staff and students. This is a lockdown. I repeat, this is a lockdown. This is not a drill. Lock your doors, turn off the lights, and get out of sight immediately. The panic hit the room like a physical shockwave. For a split second, the air left the room and everyone froze, eyes wide. Then, absolute chaos erupted. Students scrambled over chairs, dove under desks, or sprinted toward the narrow coat closet in the back of the room. Our teacher, Mr. Harlan, moved faster than I'd ever seen him move. He rushed to the heavy wooden door, threw the deadbolt, and slapped the light switch. The room plunged into a gray, shadowy darkness. He turned to us, a finger pressed to his lips, and hissed violently for us to stay low and shut up. I was stuck near the middle of the room when the lights went out, exposed and vulnerable. I dropped to the dirty tile floor and started army crawling on my stomach. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure the person next to me could hear it. The blood was rushing in my ears like a waterfall. My mind started racing through the worst-case scenarios. Was it a shooter walking the halls? A bomb threat? We had watched those terrifying active shooter training videos, but they always felt like bad acting. This felt suffocatingly, horrifyingly real. The air tasted like dust and fear. I managed to crawl all the way to the front of the room, squeezing myself behind the teacher's large oak desk. It felt safer there, a solid, heavy barrier between me and the hallway door. Mr. Harland was on the other side of the room, frantically shoving a group of terrified students behind a tall bookshelf. While I was squeezed under the desk and knees pulled to my chest, I noticed a small mini fridge humming softly in the corner. My nerves were absolutely fried, my hands shaking uncontrollably. For some reason, my brain fixated on that fridge. I reached out and cracked it open just an inch. Inside was Mr. Harlan's secret stash of Diet Pepsi. Without thinking, driven by a bizarre mix of adrenaline and a need for comfort, I grabbed a cold can. I just needed something normal to hold on to, something that wasn't part of this nightmare. I popped the tab, wincing at the crick sound, and took a sip. The cold fizz grounded me for a second. Suddenly, the entire room went deathly silent. Not a shuffle, not a whisper. Then, through the small rectangular window in the classroom door, I saw a large shadow block the hallway light. Someone was standing right there, just inches away from us. My stomach plummeted through the floor. The doorknob rattled violently. It wasn't a gentle check to see if it was locked. Someone was twisting it back and forth aggressively, shaking the entire door in its frame. Clack, 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 clack. It went on for what felt like an eternity. I held my breath until my lungs burned, clutching that cold soda can like a lifeline. Why were they trying so hard to get in? Why didn't they just move on? The aggression in the movement terrified me. Eventually, the rattling stopped, and the shadow moved away, But the silence that followed was even worse. We sat in the dark for another 20 minutes, shivering on the hard floor. I could hear a classmate across the room crying softly, trying to stifle their sobs. The air was thick with the anticipation of gunshots, screaming, or glass breaking. Every second felt like an hour. Suddenly, the school bell rang for dismissal. It was the automated bell, loud and jarringly normal. It made us all jump out of our skin. A moment later, the intercom buzzed again. Lockdown lifted. The campus is secure. Resume normal activities. A wave of relief washed over the room, so strong it nearly made me dizzy. We stood up, brushing dust off our clothes, laughing nervously. I quickly chugged the rest of the soda and hid the empty can deep in my backpack so Mr. Harlan wouldn't see. But just as I walked toward the door, the intercom crackled again. Lockdown initiated. This is not a drill. Hide now. The voice was screaming this time. We scrambled back down to the floor, terrified. Why was it happening again? Had the intruder returned? Was the all clear a trap? The confusion made the fear 10 times worse. Another 15 agonizing minutes passed before the final true all clear was given. We later found out the ridiculous truth. A police officer had simply parked in our lot to eat his lunch, sparking a panic from the principal. And the aggressive door rattling? That was just the vice principal checking locks way too enthusiastically. We had spent an hour terrified of a man eating a Big Mac,